Thanks for tuning in to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. We talk a lot about corn fertility, soybean fertility. Today we're going to focus on wheat fertility, how you can maximize the efficiency of the plant food you're putting on your wheat to get the most yield.
We also want to discuss salty soils. If you have some ground that's got a little bit too much salt, you know what I'm talking about here. That ground is terrible. You're not getting the yield that you should, but how can you fix it? We'll discuss that today.
We've got a weed of the week that you've probably seen around before, but you may not know what it is. We'll show you how to stop it if it's on your farm. But first, here's this week's Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to discuss how farmers reduce erosion.
It's interesting that you say that, Brian, because we're on our great-grandpa's farm, and you know, the spot of ground that we're standing on right now, it's kind of on a hillside, and he left this hillside into pasture because at that time their only method of weed control and seed bed preparation was to do some heavy tillage and likely multiple passes of tillage. And he knew if I do that on that hillside, it's not going to be a good thing. I'm going to have lots of erosion. So he just left this part of the farm in pasture. Well, since we adopted no-till and reduced tillage practices like strip till, we're able to farm on these hillsides that our great-grandpa never could. So one of the things that I would say first and foremost that farmers look at when it comes to erosion reduction is the type of tillage they choose to use.
To step back for just a second, what is erosion? It's basically just the loss of soil. Good topsoil is going to have a nice black color to it. It's going to have lots of organic matter in it. That's decaying or decayed plant and residue material. So we want to have that good, rich, fertile soil, that good black dirt that we're dealing with. That's the kind of stuff that's going to raise you a good crop. If you lose that, in a lot of cases it just goes down to the bottom of the hill. That's what's happened on our farm. If you lose that though, it's terrible because those hilltops aren't going to produce much. What's even worse is if you lose that for good, if it ends up in a river or a stream or a lake somewhere, that's bad news. That's stuff we don't want to happen. The two types of erosion are rain or water erosion and wind erosion. So either way that your topsoil moves, that's bad. And that's the reason why we're trying to prevent the loss of it, because it's so rich, it's so great for crop production, and it's so valuable for our nation. If our nation's topsoil was completely removed, we would become poor pretty quickly because we wouldn't have food. And we'd have to go to foreign countries and they'd charge us 10 times the amount we're paying today for food. And I mean, we wouldn't have the society that we do today. So we want to protect our soils. The government wants us to protect our soils. This is a major deal. And like Darren was saying earlier, we didn't have all the methods years ago that we do today. I think about, he was talking about our great-grandpa. I think about our grandpa who put some terraces in on ground that barely has any slope at all. But the only way he could control weeds and insects and prepare the seed bed was to do major tillage.
Now when we talk about terraces, basically a farmer is just making an earthen dam partway down the side of the hill. So if there is water that comes, there's a spot where it stops and slows it down so we don't have water just gushing down the side of the hill.
And carrying the soil. Additional things that have been done over the years is putting trees, in a lot of cases mini trees, every 40 acres or 80 acres, something like that, to slow the wind down. On our farm, we've done a lot of tiling. That dramatically reduces erosion, and the reason why is because what happens in soil is if there's too much water, the water table gets real high near the surface of the soil. When you get rain, no more water can get absorbed by the soil, so what does the rain do? Well, it has to run off. When you have tile out there, you lower the water table. Now you have capacity to hold moisture, so now when you get a rain, the rain soaks in. And most studies have shown by tiling you can reduce erosion 40 to 60%. That's a big deal, and it's a conservation practice we're doing on our farm.
And when we're talking about drainage tile, we're basically talking about a hose that has some little perforations in it that will bury about 3 feet beneath the soil surface. And it's the same kind of thing that's around your house.
Once again, erosion is the loss of soil. Farmers absolutely want to reduce the amount of erosion that's occurring every year, And just so you know how farmers have been doing, erosion has been dramatically reduced because of practices that farmers are now doing to save their soil and keep it on their farmland rather than losing it.
One of the big things that we don't have to fight with tillage anymore is weed control. We'll show you some options to control this weed later in the show.
What's next in weed control technology? Roundup Ready 2 Extend soybeans will provide tolerance to dicamba and glyphosate and will be built on the Genuity Roundup Ready to Yield trait. See them in action at extendfollowafield.com.
For lower cost, higher production, see your Mandaco agri-dealer. Ask about the best production-built land roller on the market. Mandaco, simple design for easy transport to easy use. 12 to 85-foot widths, heavy-duty 4x8 3/8-inch tube frame, and now available with a steerable wing wheel. Mandaco land rollers, improved soil-to-seed contact, faster, more uniform germination, less moisture loss, eliminate downtime due to rocks. See your Mandaco agri-dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call.
Upgrade your trailer to electric with the Rolltech electric system from AgriCover. Strong, flexible pivot arms and motor mount rotate and telescope, allowing the roll tube to rise and flex over heaped loads. The positive automatic lock is impossible to back off to control the flow of grain. This integrated system uses one wireless remote to operate up to 10 tarps and hoppers, keeping your driver out of the dust, rain, and harm's way. See the Rolltech system in action at an AgriCover dealer near you.
For years, FarmLogic has been the easiest and most convenient way to keep up with your farming operations. Well, it just got better. Introducing FarmPad for your phone. You always have your phone with you, so entering records as they happen is as easy as a touch of a button. Chemical database, GPS, service records, and more. When you do it on the farm, save it on your phone and it's backed up forever. Call or visit farmlogic.com for a free trial and find out why FarmLogic is the best decision tool for the farm.
Capello corn headers are designed for producers who expect more. Expect more grain in your bin. Expect an industry-leading 2-year manufacturer's warranty. Expect Capello-designed chopping and folding options that save you time and money. And whether red, green, or yellow, expect row size options that fit your operation because all producers deserve the best. Expect Capello. It's ahead above the rest.
A proven herbicide for decades, dicamba can provide burn-down residual control of tough and resistant weeds for up to 14 days. That's another reason why farmers will use dicamba for years to come. Brought to you by Roundup Ready Plus Weed Management Solutions.
Back a number of years ago, both Darren and I had the opportunity to go to Israel. And one of the things that people told us before we went over is they said, just make sure you bring a swimming suit. You've got to go into the Dead Sea. It's 6 in the morning, it's 85 degrees, and Darren and I decided we're gonna get up early, sun's up already, let's go for a quick swim in the Dead Sea. So we go out in the Dead Sea, and the first thing you realize with the Dead Sea, you start walking in there and you're buoyant. Your feet come up out of the water almost. It's just crazy because there's so much salt in there, and you as a human being can be buoyant. That's why sometimes you'll see on the internet these pictures of people reading a newspaper just laying there, and they don't have
no flotation device.
Right, they're just laying there in the Dead Sea reading the paper. Okay, so anyway, I'm telling you all this story about the Dead Sea. Here's where I'm going with this. We were floating around the Dead Sea for just a little bit, and that's when it hit me that we had to fix the salty soils on our farm. And you say, well, why is that? Well, the thing with the Dead Sea is when you start swimming around in there a little bit, you look straight down, you can see the bottom. It's clear as a bell. There are no fish, no plants, no algae, nothing. Everything's dead. The reason why is because of salt. Too much salt kills everything. You start dumping tons of salt out there, you got a major problem. You got dead soils. That's not what we want to have. We want to talk today about how we can fix those once and for all.
Well, just like the Dead Sea is the lowest point in the earth, the only way that water gets out of there is evaporation. It's the same thing out in your fields. Those little low spots in your field that don't drain very well, whether it's because there's some erosion that's built up some soil where it shouldn't be, or just that that spot has always lied a little bit lower than other areas. The only way water gets out of those low spots is evaporation, and it leaves all that salt out there in your fields, and we end up with issues. A lot of times we'll see those spots of the field just turn white, and eventually not even weeds will grow there. It's that bad. So it's important that we fix those areas of our field, and there are a number of things that you can do.
Well, here's the good news. Salts are leachable. In other words, they're going to flush out with water. Okay, so just think about it. All you have to do in those poorly drained spots is improve the drainage. Put some tile out there 3 feet down on the ground, maybe even 2 feet. Maybe you have to be really shallow, 2.5 feet. I don't know, and have a bunch of lines. My point is, if you get some tile out there and the water can find that tile line, it's going to carry the salt right out of it. For example, we've been in Arizona, and you would think, oh, in this super hot climate, they don't need drain tile there. Yeah, they do, because they have excess salt problems with their irrigation all the time. So what happens, they put the tile lines below ground, and yeah, I mean, they don't have nearly as much water issue as we might up here in the northern part of the country, but they have a salt issue. So they can get those salts flushing down through in the tile line if they have some water moving through that soil. That's all it takes. You get tile out there, over time, you're going to fix your salt problem. We've seen salt levels typically go down 0.2 of a point per year in most soils.
Well, it's important if you've got one of these areas out in your field and you say, man, that area is just so built up with salt, do some soil sampling out there and see what's going on. In some of those areas, you may have something else that could be a problem too, and you may want to apply a soil amendment. Maybe you want to put some more calcium out in those areas, or maybe you need calcium sulfate, something like this, where you could hook some of that salt on and displace the calcium in that equation and hook it onto the sulfate portion of the calcium sulfate and flush that out. That's very possible. You may need something else to help flush things through. Now, here's the other thing, Brian. What happens when you get dry years? You don't get a lot of flushing. This may not happen overnight.
Yeah, and we need to
fix it.
But anyway, our point is, yeah, you may need to look at amendments to get whatever issue you have out there to be even more leachable than what you have. But yeah, it's not going to happen overnight. But almost immediately, you're going to be able to start raising some crop out there. What a lot of guys have done is just taken some bale, some straw, and mixed that right in with that ground to help reduce that salt problem, basically.
Well, just to get some organic matter out there, and also to give something for soil bacteria to survive on. When you've got those high levels of salt, I would recommend planting a cover crop that can tolerate salt. Something like barley, for example, that is pretty salt tolerant. Get something growing there so you can get the biological activity going again in that soil and get something to grow, because it's not going to change overnight. You're not going to be able to flush all that salt out right away, but you can get stuff started over a couple of years, and maybe over a 3 to 5 year period, depending on how bad that field is, you can get it back up to being fairly productive.
We just want you to start taking steps today to fix the problem. And also, I want you to understand, usually when you have your salt levels going up, your soil pH levels are creeping up too. So now you've got two bad things happening, because we know soil pH, high soil pH, anything above 7.3 is also hurting your yield. So you got a number of factors here that are all going to go because you didn't address that salt problem in the beginning.
One other thing that I'd like to mention too is, depending on which crop you put out there, you may see this problem a little bit earlier than others. For example, if you're putting soybeans out in the field, soybeans don't tolerate salt very well at all. No. Even the very tolerant varieties, they aren't all that tolerant compared to especially some of the grass crops. And when you put soybeans out and you see that, man, I really have some issues with salt and high pH in some of these areas of my field, it's hurting your corn and wheat yields too, trust me. It's not, oh, it's only a problem in my beans, corn tolerates it just fine. No, your corn is suffering in those areas too. It just doesn't physically show it as early as what the beans are going to.
Well, once again, if you have salty soils that you're dealing with, fix the drainage, get some tile out there. That's the number one reason why you've got a problem, is it's poor drainage. Salts are leachable, you can flush them out through the system. If you've got a ridiculously salty area, we encourage you to get some straw out there, maybe raise some cover crops, do anything you can to get anything growing, and over time you're going to turn that thing around when you get good drainage.
One other thing you'll need to address on your farm is weed control, especially if it's this week's Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?
I wish I could apply all the PK and micronutrients this crop needs at planting.
You can. When your soils are not excessively nutrient deficient, you can apply a whole season of PK and micronutrients when you plant and get top yields at harvest. AgroLiquid's exceptional nutrient compatibility and superior efficiency allows you to prescription apply everything your crop needs safely and conveniently. Research proves it. For more info, go to agroliquid.com.
At Case IH, our equipment doesn't just meet the standards, it set them. With industry-leading SCR engine technology, Case IH gives you more power while still meeting tough emission standards. In fact, the Steiger 620 is the highest horsepower tractor to ever come off the assembly line. And all Case IH equipment is agronomically designed to help you maximize your yield potential and your profits. The world of farming is changing. Will you be ready? Learn more at caseih.com/efficientpower.
Looking to maximize yield? Quick Roots is a microbial seed inoculant that allows the plant root to explore a greater volume of soil, the key to higher yields. Quick Roots continues to generate yield response on corn, soybeans, wheat, and more. Quick Roots is applied to the seed so the live microorganisms go right to work, enhancing seedling vigor, increasing the uptake of certain nutrients, including NPK, and expanding root volume. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Call TJ Technologies or your local dealer and get your Quick Roots today.
Wake up, breakfast is served. Your roots crave P. Most of your applied P gets tied up in the soil, a natural phenomenon known as phosphorus fixation. Fix the problem with Avail Phosphorus Fertilizer Enhancer. Avail makes more P available to your roots, here, here, and here. Increasing P availability can lead to increased P uptake in the plant. That's more P, and more P. More phosphorus for your crop can mean more results in your bin. An average of 9.6 bushels per acre of corn. Breakfast is served. Supercharge your P with Avail.
If a new machine storage building or shop has been on your mind, it's time to call Morton Buildings. Now through the end of February, take advantage of discount pricing during our Building Value Days sales event. For over 110 years, Morton has served the American farmer with quality buildings for a variety of uses that meet your needs and style. Give us a call or visit us online and join generations of customers who've discovered the quality and dependability of a Morton building.
We get a lot of questions about wheat fertility each year. Usually it's, how do I make my protein levels better? Well, that's real simple. Have more available nitrogen later on in the season.
That's simple to say, Brian, not always simple to accomplish.
I realize that, but still the answer is actually pretty simple. If you want higher protein, you got to have more nitrogen late in the season. How can you get that? You can get it by having higher organic matter levels. You can get it by putting on more nitrogen, like stream barring, later in the year especially. And you can get it by using nitrogen stabilizers so your nitrogen doesn't all release at once and get turned into the nitrate form. You'll hold it in the ammonium form longer, keep it up in your topsoil a little longer, but you've got to have N late in the season.
All right, the other things with protein, we have to have adequate levels of sulfur. This is one that is getting left out in a lot of programs. We'll talk about sulfur a little bit.
Yeah, let's talk about it right now.
And also micronutrients. Those things are key when we're talking about protein.
Okay, but with sulfur, did you know that a 100 bushel wheat crop's going to remove roughly 25 pounds of sulfur? I mean, granted, some of that's going to stay in the residue and stay in the field if you leave the residue out there, but there's a certain amount of that absolutely is leaving the field when the grain leaves. You need some sulfur every year because sulfur, just like nitrate, is leachable. It's not going to stick around. If you get decent rains during the year, your sulfur is probably gone. So every year you should be applying some sulfur. Now, not all of them.
The same is true with micronutrients,
Well,
Brian.
not all of them, though.
You need some micros out there every year, and typically what we're doing is using a blended product that's blended for wheat application that has a number of different micros in it, because it's really hard if you say, I need some copper, or I need some zinc, or I need some manganese. It's hard to get 1 pound or less spread evenly across a field. So a lot of times we're using a blended product like this, and we've seen some really good gains and a really nice return on investment.
It only costs
pretty
5 or 10.
consistently.
Yeah, it only costs $5 or $10 an acre, so it's almost nothing, depending on your yield goal, $5 or $10.
All right, so we've talked a lot about protein. Let's talk about yield, because protein is one component, but yield is another thing, and it's not just the nitrogen that's holding yield back. I have a lot of guys that say, well, my wheat yields are disappointing. I guess I needed to put on more nitrogen. Not necessarily. P and K are a really big deal in wheat.
But what we encourage you to do is do good soil tests and then do some plant tissue tests too. Sample every week from when your wheat comes up until you get late in the season. Every week, just take 1 or 2 fields, test in the best area and test in the worst area, and send those samples in every week. It's not going to cost you much money, but you're going to have so much information. And what we find is probably what you're going to find too. On a lot of fields, we see that farmers are lacking in potassium and phosphorus, just like Darren is saying. What we want you to do is download the free Ag PhD fertilizer removal app. Then you can punch in any crop you've got, any yield goal you've got, and you'll see exactly what it removes. I'll tell you right now, if you've got 100 bushel spring wheat, you're going to remove roughly 75 pounds of phosphorus or phosphate and 150 pounds of K2O potassium. Again, a bunch of that's going to stay in the field with the stover, but still, you got to have that much to raise a 100 bushel crop. That's a lot of fertility. You've got to make sure your soil has that.
Well, it certainly is. And when we're thinking about 2-year fertility programs and guys that say, well, I'm going to put on this much fertility this year and that'll hold me over for a couple of years, think again. Those programs are out of date.
Well, no, wait a second. It might if you're putting enough on. We just need you to make sure that you're fertilizing appropriately for 2 years worth of crop if you're doing a 2-year fertilizer program.
You've got to do some tissue analysis just to verify what's actually getting into the plant, because I hear a lot of guys in wheat growing areas that say, well, my soil test said my parts per million on potassium were really pretty good, so I should be able to cut back, right? Well, there's more than just parts per million. I think that a better reading is really the base saturation on your soil test, so you can see where that potassium is in ratio to other nutrients like calcium and magnesium, for example. If you have high levels of calcium and magnesium in your soil, chances are you may not have enough potassium that's available for your crop.
Well, you've got to have 4 to 8% potassium in that base saturation test. That's what we're looking for on the soil test. I mean, there's a lot we can talk about with wheat fertility, but again, we want you to download that free Ag PhD fertilizer removal app for your smartphone or your iPad, so then you can run your own numbers yourself. It's a free app, by the way. We just put it out there so you have good information so you can make the right decisions for your farm going into next year.
Well, fortunately, one thing that normally isn't a huge problem in wheat production is our Weed of the Week. We'll show you how to stop it coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
You work to protect your farm's legacy and to keep it going. Introducing the Enlist Weed Control System, an advanced herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate for exceptional control of tough weeds. The next chapter begins.
Our Weed of the Week is an annual weed that Roundup is not the best on. It's toothed spurge.
One of the things about tooth spurge that's interesting is when you break that plant, it's filled with white latex. So it's a lot like a leafy spurge in that regard, where you've got the white inside. That's kind of a giveaway for me. With tooth spurge, yeah, there are a number of different products that are effective on it, but there are quite a few that aren't too. One crop that I get some questions on from time to time is in sugar beets. Beta Mix and also Upbeat are also pretty good on tooth spurge control. In wheat, I really like Husky post-emerge. I like Sharpen as my pre-emerge option. In soybeans, I like Valor. It's done a pretty good job, and I think Fierce is even better at controlling tooth spurge pre-emerge. Post-emerge, I've always used a Basagran Pursuit combination in conventional beans. It's worked quite well. A full rate of Cobra can be effective too. In corn, I like Balance Flex in states where it's labeled, or any of the premixes that contain Balance Flex. It works pretty well. Post-emerge, Buctril has been my favorite product when you mix it with atrazine. Status is also okay too.
The thing with this tooth spurge, a lot of times it doesn't come up until pretty late in the season, so if you do have a real good crop canopy, you don't usually see it as much. But it doesn't seem like this plant needs a lot of sunlight. It just gets going below the canopy if your canopy's not super dense sometimes, so you got to really pay attention to it early and late in the season.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's weed, but Iron Talk is coming up next.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
What are farmers doing to feed the planet? They're using Quadtrek technology, soil management, and planting systems from Case IH to foster a better growing environment that maximizes yield potential. Visit caseih.com to be ready.
Could one of your most profitable pieces of equipment be your computer in 2014? In today's Iron Talk, we'll explain how your office computer could add 10 to 20% to your yields this year. Here's how I got there. On our farm last year, variable rate planting showed a 6% return on investment. Planting a higher population in the good areas of the field and a lower population through lighter soil types and lower production areas makes sense on a couple of fronts. Certainly, you save the cost of seed that you'd be wasting by overplanting certain areas, and you also could gain yield by not underseeding on the good areas. Then we look at one of the big things coming down the road for planters that's already available for drills: variable variety planting. Last year in research done by SDSU and Raven, the talk was that a yield increase of 10% was realistic. I can easily see that for some of the fields on our own farm. When you take the simple case of iron deficiency chlorosis, where soybeans visually show interveinal chlorosis or yellowing when soil's pHs rise above 7.2 and high salts, carbonates, or even nitrates are present, well, yields are cut in half or maybe even zero in those areas of the field when planting your high-yielding racehorse type variety. Planting the defensive bean across the field has led to a 5 to 10% lower yield potential overall on our farm. Now, it makes all the sense in the world to plant that great defensive bean into the IDC areas of the field and using the racehorse for the rest. As I mentioned, this is possible right now with air drills, and it should be a reality with commercially available planters in the next 5 years or so. To take advantage of this, you need to be doing grid soil sampling now and fully utilizing your yield and fertility maps to create custom plans for each field. There's little doubt your office computer can add 10 to 20% to your yields this year if you really push yourself to go for all the yield potential that's out there. It's all the time for today's Iron Talk, but now back to the show.
With spring right around the corner, get your Case IH equipment ready with Titan Machinery's Uptime Maintenance Program. Uptime is Titan's preventative maintenance inspection, designed to eliminate costly downtime during the short planting season. Our technicians average nearly 10 years of experience and use a comprehensive Case IH factory checklist to find potential problems before they slow you down. Use your Titan Access account and make no payment and pay no interest until spring 2014 for qualifying uptime specials. Plant worry-free with Titan Machinery. Better solutions.
You expect a lot from this seed, and as it grows through each stage of development, Agroculture Liquid Fertilizers is there, feeding your crop exactly what it needs when it needs it. So no matter how you fertilize, no matter when, AgroLiquid efficiently brings all the nutrients your crop needs for a great harvest. From 1 kernel in the ground to 600 on the ear. For better yields and better quality, Agroculture Liquid Fertilizers.
Capello corn headers are designed for producers who expect more. Expect more grain in your bin. Expect an industry-leading 2-year manufacturer's warranty. Expect Capello-designed chopping and folding options that save you time and money. And whether red, green, or yellow, expect row size options that fit your operation because all producers deserve the best. Expect Capello. It's ahead above the rest.
If you watch Ag PhD TV, you'll love the new Ag PhD radio show each weekday on Rural Radio Sirius XM Channel 80. This is Darren Hefty. On the new Ag PhD radio program, we'll take live callers and provide the agronomic information and brotherly banter you've come to expect from Ag PhD. We'll feature a Back 40 segment where we talk to farmers and agronomists around the country to share what's going on with crop production. And it wouldn't be Ag PhD without addressing a pest of the day. Tune in to the Ag PhD radio show each weekday at 2 p.m. Central on Rural Radio Sirius XM Channel 80.
Whether you're feeding cattle, milking cows, or baling hay, the work on your farm is never done, which is why you need equipment that works as hard as you do. Get the efficiency and versatility you need with Case IH. From farm-all compact and utility tractors to balers and mowers, all Case IH equipment is designed with one thing in mind: getting the job done. To learn more, visit caseih.com/livestock.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
The all-new S-Cube commercial tender is the only tender on the market with poly tanks, giving you the capability to haul seed, fertilizer, water, or liquid fertilizer. Each cube can hold 300 units of seed, 2,000 gallons of liquid, or 300 cubic feet of fertilizer. Options include full functioning wireless remote, stainless steel conveyors, and self-contained hydraulics. Get yours today at Norwood Sales.
That's all the time we have for today's show, but be sure to tune in again next time for another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
Why are many farmers reducing tillage? Reduced tillage has shown to increase soil's organic matter levels, reduce erosion potential, improve soil structure, and increase microbial activity and soil life. For more information, visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org.